let's get started.
Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gita Dhyanam. Om Parthaya Pratibhuditam Bhagavata Narayanina Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshini Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayini Amba Tvamanusandathami Bhagavad-Gita Bhavadveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhi Pullaravindayata Patra Nitra Yena Tvaya Bharatataya Purnaha Prajvalido Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Sutra Vaitrika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gita Mritaduhe Namaha Sarvopanishadu Gavo Dukta Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsasudhir Bhukta Duktam Gitamritam Mahat Vasudeva Sutam Devam Tam Sachanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Bhishmadrona Tata Jayadratha Jala Gandhara Nilotpala Shalyagrahavati Kripena Vahani Karnena Velakula Ashwatthama Vikarna Ghora Makara Duryodhana Vartini Sotirna Khalu Pandavai Rananadi Kaivartaka Keshavaha Parasharyavacha Saroja Mamalam Gitartha Gandotkatam Nanakyanaka Kesaram Harikata Sambodhana Bodhitam Loki Sajjana Shatparairaharaha Pipiyamanam Muda Bhuyad Bharata Pankajam Kalimala Pradvamsina Shreyase Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayati Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Sunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vede Sangha Padakramupanishade Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam na Vidussura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha.
Okay, Hari Om. So, we have discussed this earlier, that there are 3 chapters in the Bhagavad-Gita that are kind of, in a manner of speaking, termed as a summary of the Bhagavad-Gita. The first one is chapter 2, which is a summary in, like a preface. Chapter 18 which is summary after in retrospect, so to say, and chapter 15, which is in the middle, not bang in the middle, but kind of in the middle. And why is it that these are called quote unquote summaries, or the sangraha of the adhyaya? The reason is because these are chapters which cover almost all, if not all, the topics that are covered in the entire Bhagavad-Gita. They at least touch upon them, or they talk about them, so that you get a feel for the entire Bhagavad-Gita when you read any of these 3 chapters. And chapter 15 is a very important, a very small, short, sweet chapter, but very important. That's because chapter 15 itself is referred to as a Shastra, because it is complete body of knowledge. It contains everything that one really needs to know, in a sense. A full, complete, thorough body of knowledge. And that is so because it bestows to us the understanding of the Supreme Person, the Supreme Self. And that's why it's called Purushottama Yoga. And one who has the understanding of the Supreme Self practically knows everything. That is why this also, like we said in chapter 14, it's an important chapter because it gives us a very good knowledge about ourselves, our gunas. Here we are getting a very concise, precise knowledge of the Supreme Self. And that is why this also is a very, very important chapter in the Bhagavad-Gita. In Vedanta, there are 2 types of scriptures. One is called the Prakarana Grantha. Prakarana means topic. So, Grantha or text that covers topics, or a topical text, is called a Prakarana Grantha. And Shastra Grantha is something which is a complete text. All topics are covered. It gives a holistic knowledge. And chapter 15 is a Shastra in itself because it is a complete text. Now, this chapter is also chanted probably the maximum. Actually, I would venture to say the maximum. It is chanted the maximum. And it is also a practice to chant this chapter right before having one's meals, like food. And also we had seen in chapter 4, there was one verse, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi Brahmagnav Brahmana Hutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. That also we said is chanted before meals. The reason is that even that verse, it talks about everything as the Supreme Self, the Supreme Brahman. And chapter 15 gives us the knowledge of the Supreme Brahman. And why is it that we chant before food? Because normally human beings, we can miss out anything in life. Like we can miss out on satsang, we can miss out on a sport, we can miss out on even brushing our teeth in the morning. But one thing that we will not miss out on is food. Food is compulsory, right? One meal or the other we have to have. And worst case, if we have fasting for some hours, it has to be quickly done away with. So food is compulsory. So this indicates this kind of a quote unquote custom, or even if you will call it a diktat, indicates that reciting chapter 15 is compulsory for the spiritual seeker. That is the reason it is like food in that sense, or food is like this in that sense. Just like food is vital, it is critical for the body. Reciting chapter 15 or this chapter, knowledge of this chapter is critical for the evolution of the soul. My Guruji, Swami Advayanandaji, he says that the body of a human being is meant for attaining the Supreme. There is no other creature, there is no other part of creation that can, have the aspiration to attain Supreme or attain liberation or attain moksha other than the human being. And the body itself is priceless. Every organ in the body is priceless. Imagine being without one of them. Life would be so different and so much more difficult. And this, Swami Advayanandaji says, being this existence is a priceless gift from Bhagavan. It's a precious existence. And we must not waste it. Like squandering wealth. People who have wealth and squander it. We have this precious gift from Bhagavan. We should not waste it. This is an existence in which we can gain the knowledge of the Supreme Self. And this chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita gives us that knowledge of the Supreme Self and also tells us how to put our life in good use. Now, Bhagavan had said in the last two verses of the previous chapter, Bhagavan had said, Mam cha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati tatyan brahma bhuyaya kalpate brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya ekantikasya cha. So Bhagavan had said, two very, very important and critical verses, very big statements by Bhagavan towards the end of the chapter. He said, one who serves me with devotion, Bhagavan with devotion, with bhakti yoga, unswavering bhakti yoga, that person is able to cross beyond the gunas and is fit for the state of Brahman. And he says, for I am surely the abode of Brahman, the immortal and the immutable, of eternal dharma and of absolute bliss. So what is Bhagavan telling us here? First, he is telling us, serve me with unswavering bhakti yoga. That's a big ask of Bhagavan to the spiritual aspirant, right? The big, big ask. And then he gives assurance that you will cross beyond the ocean of gunas and you'll be fit to attain a state of Brahman. And he describes it as, he says, I am the abode of Brahman. And he says, I am the abode of the immortal and the immutable. I am the abode of eternal dharma. I am the abode of absolute bliss. Now, these are statements that are really big from Bhagavan. And he himself volunteers in this chapter. He proceeds to elaborate on these statements that he has made towards the end of chapter 14. And that is what chapter 15 is all about. Normally we see, in the beginning of chapters, either Arjuna is asking a question, which then Bhagavan proceeds to explain, or Bhagavan gives a kind of makes a statement that will lead Arjuna to ask a question. But in this case, Bhagavan himself, because of those two statements he made in concluding the last chapter, he himself, proceeds to explain these powerful statements. And that is how we commence chapter 15.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Panchadashodhyayaha.
Atha Panchadashodhyayaha.
Purushottama Yogaha.
Purushottama Yogaha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Urdhvamulamadasyakam.
Urdhvamulamadasyakam.
Ashwattham prahuravyayam.
Ashwattham prahuravyayam.
Chandamsi yasya parnani.
Chandamsi yasya parnani.
Yastam veda savedavit.
Yastam veda savedavit.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha. Urdhvamulamadasyakam. Ashwattham prahuravyayam. Chandamsi yasya parnani. Yastam veda savedavit.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha, the blessed Lord said, Prahuhu, it is said, Avyayam, the indestructible, Ashwatham, people tree, the people tree, Urdhva Moolam, with roots above, Adashakam, with branches below, Yasya, whose Parnani leaves are Chandamsi, the Veda mantras, Yaha, one who Veda knows, Tam, that, Saha, that person, Vedavita, knower of the Vedas. The Blessed Lord said, it is said that the indestructible peepal tree has its roots above and branches below, whose leaves are the Veda mantras. One who knows that is the knower of the Vedas. The entire realm of the known and the unknown, what we see, what we wish to attain. The known is what we all experience, what we all see, and the unknown is what we wish to attain. This entire realm of the ephemeral and the permanent, the false and the truth, all of this Bhagavan covers and talks about using a metaphor. So the metaphor is the Ashwatha tree. And Bhagavan had referred to the Ashwatha or the peepal tree in chapter 10 also, Vibhuti Yoga. There he had said, when he was describing himself in various manifestations or as various manifestations, he had said, Ashwatha sarva vrikshanam. Among all the trees, I am Ashwatha. I am the peepal. And the botanical name for peepal is the Ficus religiosa, or the sacred fig, or the peepal tree. It is also called the Bodhi tree. It is the tree under which Gautama Buddha or Siddhartha attained the status of Gautama Buddha. Arasa Maram, it's called. It's one of the most auspicious trees, both in terms of its magnitude and lifespan. It is all pervading and immortal, or seems immortal, as it lives for centuries. It just lives on and on and on and on. And another thing about this tree is it does not provide any edible fruit, or it's really not of much use to the human being, in terms of fulfilling the material requirements of existence, of samsara. And that is why also it is regarded as sacred. And this metaphor that Bhagavan uses is of this tree having roots above and branches below. And he uses roots above, Urdhva Moolam and Adha Shakam. Urdhvam indicates superiority, like we normally use, right? Above means above something else, and below means below something else. And Adha indicates inferiority. So Urdhvam for superior and Adha for inferior, referring to the Brahman as the superior and the Samsara as the inferior. The Kshetragya as the superior and the Kshetra as the inferior. And this entire realm of transmigration of this ephemeral samsara that we experience, of this samsara, what this indicates is that the root cause, the source of all of this is the Moolam, the Supreme Brahman. See, the Ashwatha tree is extremely long-standing. It lives for generations. That is why it is termed as indestructible. Scientific estimates, it ranges from 900 to over 2000 years. The current Ashwatha tree that is living is beyond 2400 years. And it is said to be in Sri Lanka. Thus, it is said to be Prahuhu Avyayam. It is said to be indestructible. Yet it is not, just like samsara. Even after 2400 years or beyond, someday it ceases to be. Now, the beauty of the word of the meaning of the word Ashwatha, that is also really beautiful. Ashwatha means what was there yesterday is not today. That which was yesterday is not today. The ever-changing, the ephemeral, that is what Ashwatha means. So how beautiful this choice of Bhagavan's words. Ashwatha means ephemeral, but the Ashwatha tree is known to be everlasting. And Bhagavan uses this as a metaphor to indicate the supremacy of the Brahman, of the ultimate, over the ephemeral samsara. Also, another form of the fig tree is the banyan tree. Banyan tree is a family of the Ashwatha tree. It's a type of a fig. And we have seen that banyan provides the sap from above and sends its branches below. So possibly Bhagavan has also included the banyan into this reference. Oftentimes there is discussion on, Ashwatha doesn't have roots above and so on and so forth. Okay, is it banyan tree is referring to? Is it, peepal tree is referring to, and so on. The point is that he's making a metaphor. And for all we know, so many years ago, maybe at that time, there was only one form of this sacred fig tree. And as evolution evolves, multiple forms also came into being. Right? Like now they have released this new movie of dinosaurs. They are not there at all. So evolution has seen those kind of changes. So that is really irrelevant. What is relevant to us is the metaphor that is being used. So just like this fig tree, sacred fig tree that receives its sap from above and sends the branches below, samsara receives its sustenance from the Brahman and comes down into earthly existence. The sustenance, everything comes from the Kshetrajya. And Bhagavan says, he talks about the leaves of the tree. The leaves of the tree represent the diversity and the varied expressions of life. Just as the leaves distinguish one branch of the tree from the other, and one tree itself from another tree, the Vedic hymns help the spiritual seeker to distinguish between the various paths of life. The Vedas describe all paths of life, starting with all kinds of gunas that leads to various paths of life. So just like these leaves, these Veda mantras, they help describe to the seeker, or help the seeker understand the through various branches of knowledge, the various paths of life that can be followed. Additionally, see, the rough edges of the branches are kind of made up by the green shoots and leaves. Makes the tree look a lot more beautiful. After fall season, a lot of the trees, that also looks beautiful, but you see the rough edges. Similarly, the Veda mantras help smoothen out the rough edges of samsara. Samsara has a lot of rough edges. It's not a smooth journey for any human being. And the Veda mantras help smooth out this rough journey. And just like the tree itself, even what seems to be indestructible and unchangeable comes to an end in samsara. Everything comes to an end. Like the tree also comes to an end. And samsara itself also comes to an end with pralaya. And Bhagavan says, one who understands this paradigm. What paradigm? The seemingly permanent but impermanent. The visible coming into existence from the invisible, being nourished by the invisible. So the means of nourishment and growth that enables realization of the Supreme. And Bhagavan says, one who understands this is the true knower of the Vedas, Vedavita. So how does this tree of life, the samsara vriksha, function? That Bhagavan talks about in the next verse.
Adashchodvam prasritastasya shakaha.
Adashchodvam prasritastasya shakhaha.
Guna pravriddha vishaya pravalaha.
Guna pravriddha vishaya pravalaha.
Adasya mulyananusanthatani.
Adasya mulyananusanthatani.
Karmanubandhini manushya-loke.
Karmanubandhini manushya-loke.
Adashchodvam prasritastasya shakaha. Guna pravriddha vishaya pravalaha. Adasya mulyananusanthatani. Karmanubandhini manushya-loke.
Adaha means below. Cha and urdhvam, above. Prasrita, spread. Tasya, its shakaha, branches. Guna pravriddha, nourished by the gunas. Pravriddha, nourished. Vishaya pravalaha, the sense objects are its buds. Cha and adaha, below. Manushya loke, in the world of humans. Anusantatani, spread forth. Moolani, the roots. Karmanu bandini, binding to action. Below and above are spread its branches, nourished by the gunas. The sense objects are its buds. And below in the world of humans, spread forth its roots, binding to action. After, of course, originating action itself. So Bhagavan says, Tasya Shakaha. He's talking about the branches. Tasya Samsara Vriksha Shakaha. The branches of this Samsara, the tree of life, the Samsara tree. Adashchodhvam Prasritas. They spread up and down profusely. The levels reached in the material world are obviously higher and lower. The higher levels provide more joy and the lower levels provide more sorrow. We all actually feel a high when we are at the higher level. You know, we call it giving it a high also, right? The real high. And also when it goes down below to organisms, you know, which are below the existence of creatures that are below the existence, considered below the existence of humans, whether they be animals, plants, bacteria, virus, whatever it may be, that is also spreading below. And when we say other worlds, the higher worlds, we have seen this earlier. They represent the superior worlds. Like, for example, the Bhuvaha, Suvaha, Janaha, Mahaha, Tapaha, Satyam. We have gone through all of these in detail. So these are the branches that reach upwards. And not just the lower existence in the planet Earth, but the worlds that are below the planet Earth, below Bhu, those are also covered by the branches that go below. So branches that spread profusely above and below, covering all of existence, all of creation above and all of creation below. And Bhagavan says, Guna Pravriddhaha. These are nourished by the gunas. We saw that extensively in the last satsang also. Remember, Bhagavan had said that those abiding in sattva go upwards. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha. Those abiding in rajas stay in the middle. Madhye tishtanti rajasaha. And those who are tamasic go downward. Adho gachanti tamasaha. So the functioning of the gunas thus supplies the required sap, like the roots of the tree supply the required sap or nourishment. And Bhagavan says, Vishaya Pravalaha, with the sense objects as its buds. See, the buds of a tree are the ones that are interacting with its environment. So the bees first come and sit on the buds. So all of the environment, you know, oxygen is experienced by the tree, by the leaf tip or the buds. Similarly, the senses of the human being feasting on sense objects is the experience of the human being. That is how we experience the world around us. So these senses, they sprout into buds and into new branches continuously all the time, giving us various new experiences of living in this world. And this is the process that makes us human beings run behind what we like and run away from what we hate. So we keep pursuing what we like and we avoid what we do not like. Raga Dvesha. And it's, you know, Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda says in a very funny manner, you know, we run behind what we like, but what we like runs away from us. And we run away from what we don't like, and what we don't like runs towards us. The thriving of the samsara vriksha is inevitable as long as the gunas are providing the nourishment, the sap, supply, this unending supply. And Bhagavan says, Adascha Moolanyanu Santatani. The roots below, they spread forth everywhere. These roots are the vasanas or the inherent tendencies, the wishes and wants, the likes and dislikes, the raga-dveshas of the human mind and intellect. These reside in the mind and intellect. And what do? karmanu bandhini manushya loke, bind to action in the human world. They first initiate action and then cause bondage to action. See, all creatures have likes and dislikes. Everyone, like I see the cats in my daughter's house here, they have their likes and dislikes. They're very different, the two of them, from each other in terms of their likes and dislikes. But other creatures, their likes and dislikes do not come from bondage. It comes from instinct. They are fundamentally driven by instinct. Even though their lives may be more bound than the human beings' lives, their likes and dislikes do not come from bondage. It is this cultivated human mind and intellect, which is evolved, which is then able to set Purushottama. We saw this in the beginning again. Human goals. Purushottama means human goals. It is this mind and intellect that enables us to set goals, pursue them, wish for them, pray for them, achieve them. Right? And we use these, what do we use? We use logic and we use emotion. And these are the likes and dislikes that cause bondage for the human being. So the human being bondage comes from our own doing. It's not coming from any other instinctual existence. So what is Bhagavan's message in these two verses? Two very important verses to begin the chapter that sets the context also. So Bhagavan is saying aerial, and submerged roots are the two types of roots of the Ashwatha tree. The tree materializes from them and is nourished by them. Similarly, Ishvara is the source of the entire samsara, which has sprung forth from Ishvara and is also nourished by Ishvara. The various activities that are branching forth in the material world, all are activities. It's like innumerable branches. That is how it just springs forth. And these can be reformed. They can be readjusted, resulting in a more refined and spiritually tuned personality for the human being. So all our activities, all the things that spring forth from us can be refined and readjusted. Just like pruning of the branches or the buds or the tips of the trees. When you prune them, they start looking much more beautiful, much more attractive. Similarly, the human being who prunes his material reach outs, so to say, starts looking more and more truly beautiful, more attractive, and also helps the growth of the personality. Just like pruning helps the growth of the tree itself. The leaves and the buds interact with the environment like our sense organs interact with the environment. And coming back a full circle, actions or karma bind the person to samsara, just like roots of the tree bind the tree to the ground. So the only form of existence, the biggest message Bhagavan gives here is the only form of existence where forward or backward movement is possible through conscious action, not by instinct, through conscious action. By taking conscious action, forward movement or backward movement is possible. And the only form that is true, that happens is the human existence, the Manushya Loke. So what are the actions that are prescribed for a spiritual seeker who has understood this, the Veda-Vita? So when I was reading this the first time, it again, classic analogy with my previous life, right? I used to tell leaders at work, and like Veda-Vita, mind you, my telling this was to leaders primarily, not to the young new joiners, the leaders, even to the new joiners also actually, but in a different context. So I used to tell them that to choose the right role for you, or even the right place to work for the new joinees, ask two questions, I used to tell them. The first question is, I said, ask if this organization is aligned to you, aligned to me. So normally you will always say individual has to align. So this is contrastingly, drastically opposite. Is the organization aligned to me? Meaning, is it an aspirations fulfillment kshetra? In that kshetra, in that field, in that organization, can my aspirations get fulfilled? If my aspirations can get fulfilled in that organization, that means that organization is aligned to me. And then I used to say, ask another question, is the organization loyal to me? This was even more, especially to even to leaders and especially to some of the youngsters. It used to be like, what are you saying? You are expected to be loyal, right? So how do you know if the organization is loyal to you? Imagine that you are resigning from the organization. When you resign, when you want to leave, when you want to go away, there are 3 ways that people can behave. And this is true for going away from life also. There are 3 ways people can behave. One way is like everybody does normally, oh, is that so? So it's a piece of information and, slight expression of regret and then move on. Okay, so now what do? We need to move on with life, correct? So what do? Picture to abhi baki hai mere dost, so we got to keep moving on. So what do I do to move on? Can you hand over? Can you take over? Those kind of things. The other way of response or reaction is a sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, you can actually hear an audible sigh of relief. I was wanting to fire you and, firing is a very tough job. I couldn't bring myself to do that. Phew, you have relieved me of a humongous responsibility. Thank God you are leaving. And then the third response would be, what are you talking? That's nonsense. What can I do to make you stay back? I don't want to let go of you. Obviously, the third one means there is more loyalty. And I used to tell my people, if the answer to both of these are yes, the organization is aligned to me, yes. Organization is loyal to me, yes. Then cut off everything else. Everything, you've got to cut off, just remove everything else from your radar. And then completely focus, dive in, like don't we say, dive in into your work, right? So dive in, completely focus, align, be loyal, be aligned and strive, work hard. So now let us see Bhagavan, what he tells this Vedavitu who is aspiring for that ultimate. We'll recite verses 3 and 4 together.
Arupamasyeha tatopalabhyate.
Narupamasyeha tatopalabhyate.
Nanto na chadir na cha sampratishta.
Nanto na chadir na cha sampratishta.
Ashwatthamenam suvirudha-moolam.
Ashwatthamenam suvirudha-moolam.
Asanga-shastrena dhridena chitva.
Asanga-shastrena dhridena chitva.
Tatapadam tatparimargitavyam.
Tatapadam tatparimargitavyam.
Yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyaha.
Yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyaha.
Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye.
Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye.
Yata pravritti prasrita purani.
Yata pravritti prasrita purani.
Narupamasyeha tatopalabhyate. Nanto na chadir na cha sampratishta. Ashwatthamenam suvirudha-moolam. Asanga-shastrena dhridena chitva. Tatapadam tatparimargitavyam. Yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyaha. Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye. Yata pravritti prasrita purani.
So Bhagavan says, you have to bear with me for the word by word translation. Okay. Now 2 verses, long ones. Iha, herein, here. Where? Here. Where we are. Rupam, the form. Asya, of this tree. We will see which tree. Obviously, the banyan tree or, the Ashwatha tree or the Samsara Vriksha, the tree of life. Tataha, as such, na, not, upalabhyate, found. It is not found. Na, not, antaha, its end. Cha, and, na, not, adihi, its origin. cha and na not sampratishta, its middle. Asanga shastrena, with the weapon of non-attachment. Shastra weapon, asanga, non-attachment. Dridena, sharpened, made strong. Chitva, having cut. Enam, this. Suvirudha moolam, firmly rooted. Ashwatham, tree of life. Tataha, then. Parimargitavyam, seek, pursue. Tataha, that. Padam, goal. Yasmin gata, reaching which. Na, not. Nivartanti, return. Bhuyaha, again. Cha, and. Eva, even. Tam, in that. Adyam, primeval, from the beginning, for time immemorial. Purusham, being. Prapadye, surrender. Yataha, from which. Pravrittihi, all activity. Prasrita, sprung forth. Purani, since ancient times. So Bhagavan is saying, herein, the form of this tree of life, this samsara vriksha, is as such not found. Neither its end, nor its origin, nor its middle. With the strong weapon, sharpened axe of non-attachment, having cut this firmly rooted tree of life, then pursue or seek that goal, reaching which one does not return again. There's no coming back. And even surrender to or seek refuge in that primeval being, Purusha, from which all activity has sprung forth since time immemorial. So a big lesson for spiritual seekers to follow here. Na rupam asyeha tatopa labhyate. The form of this tree, this Ashwatha tree or the tree of life or samsara, is not found here. Neither do we see a tree which is uprooted. You know, you can imagine a picture of roots above and branches below. You don't see that in this world. Even the banyan tree has branches above only. Nor the actual tree of life, the samsara. You may think you see it, but it is actually Maya in reality. It is just an experience. No one can hold on to it. It chooses when to come and when to go. That's the appearance. And this appearance has extremely strong roots that people seemingly hold on to. They think they are holding on to. But realize at some point or the other that they cannot hold on to it. Obviously, do we control our lives, or do our lives direct the journey that we have all taken and are taking and will take in the future? We may think that we control, but in actual, it's not so. And we realize that when we look into our past, it's quite obvious. You know, there are so many things that have happened beyond us, beyond our control. So there is this very interesting story. You know, King Prahlada, not the earlier Prahlada, King Prahlada, after ruling the kingdom for a long, long period of time. After he has completed his duties in this world, and he being Bhakt Prahlada, you know, he's being the one who has followed the path of Ananya Bhakti, right? Who has followed that Bhakti Yoga. Narayana himself comes down to escort him, to take him with him. And earlier too, Prahlad had the fortune of interacting with Narayana in the form of his avatar, Narasimha, right? And now Prahlada, being that noble king, in addition to being a Bhakt, you know, he says, he understands that he's getting this privilege. It's a fantastic, it's probably the ultimate. He's getting the ultimate, the absolute ultimate. And he says, why me alone? Why not all my people, my subjects? They are mine anyway. They are all my people, very nice human beings. So he asked Bhagavan, can I bring them along? And Bhagavan, smiling, you know, he just smiles, gives a knowing smile, and he says, sure, why not? Ask them. So Prahlad goes about asking everybody, you know, the way, he's the Veda Vitta. He has cut his ties to samsara. Not only that, he has pursued that ultimate goal with absolute devotion throughout his life. Even at his own peril, when he was trying to be killed, all he had in his mind was Narayana, right? So that kind of accomplished person goes around asking everyone, will you come with me? This is what is there. It's the ultimate. It's the best. You cannot imagine. And everyone tells him, no, some excuse or the other that ties them to samsara. I have to come accomplish this. I have to make sure this happens. So right now, I cannot leave this world and come with you. Finally, Prahlad went and asked the pig after everybody else. And the pig says, look at me, I'm in such this wonderful ditch. I'm lounging here. This is like a beautiful lounge for me. And you want me to leave this and come with you somewhere? I don't want to come. So pun intended, in some ways, samsara is this wonderful ditch which people get tied into. That's what the story has, a pun intended. And then Prahlada realizes why Bhagavan had given that knowing smile. People are inextricably, cannot be removed, tied to samsaric life while they are alive. Just like one being tied to a dream while sleeping. So even in organizations, where I used to talk to these people and tell them that, right? Most people leave their jobs in pursuit of something which is imaginary. Or they just stay there in pursuit of something imaginary. Two extremes. It is the people who just put their head down and work, strive, like Bhagavan used, right? He uses the word strive. So those are the people who really contribute not only to the organization, but to themselves also, to their own growth, personal growth. People leave organizations pursuing a imaginary, what I used to call the rainbow. I used to tell them, don't follow the rainbow. Because when you follow the rainbow, what happens? You think it is in one direction, let us say west. And then you suddenly find it's not there. You have to turn north. And then you suddenly see it's not there. Even if you start driving behind a rainbow, that is exactly what happens. And when you are just sitting there doing nothing, like this pig, in the mucky ground, I used to tell them, don't make this your retirement home. It's not leading to any kind of growth. You will find these people all around you. Either they are running behind something imaginary or they are stranded where they are. In the initial days of the freedom struggle, number of people used to ask the freedom fighters, what are you guys doing? Why are you creating this unnecessary issue? Everything is hunky-dory. Everything is perfectly fine. It's all so nice. They are even building the railways. And it took a lot of effort, to educate people what bondage is, what slavery is. You can live without railways, but living in bondage, living in slavery is something else. But here we are talking about samsara being the bondage. How do you explain that to people? How do you talk to them about that being? It's practically impossible to explain, even to accomplished spiritual seekers. It takes a lot for human beings to understand the bondage of this tree of life. Okay, but we don't have to bother about that bondage of samsara. Let us not, like earlier when we talked about future life and so on and so forth. In our progress, in our state where we are, why do we even have to bother about that? We'll reach that domain when we get to it. We'll cross the bridge, as they say, when we get to it. Is it not very obvious to us as aspirants at the level we are in spirituality that living this life in a very accomplished manner, aspiring for Jivan Mukti, that is meaningful? We have learned and we have gone through what the term Jivan Mukti means, right? So that indeed is possible. Surrendering to the higher ideal, whatever the higher ideal means, going to the extreme to surrender to the bigger picture, to the higher ideal, to the overall welfare, to the holistic aspect. And Bhagavan says that he manifests in that higher ideal. Handling success and failure with equanimity. All in this life, being happy to the core and being happy for a longer period of duration. possibly for as long as we live. All that is Jivan Mukti. So aspiring for that makes sense to all of us. There's nothing wrong in that. Just for this goal, it is worth seeking refuge in that primeval being. Only for that goal. Just to make more meaning out of our own lives. That complete surrender, that prapadye. Swami Chinmayananda, after realizing the true purpose of life. So Swami Chinmayananda, coincidentally, this is his 100th year, birth year. And, they've also released a movie in YouTube on him. So if you're interested, you can follow. So he started off as a young student, questioning everything, became a freedom fighter, was almost on the verge of dying as a freedom fighter, was thrown away onto the streets, rescued, and then came back like a second life, became a journalist, and then questioned spiritual masters, went to Rishikesh to kind of, in his own words, to unmask these saints who were fooling the world, and then got drawn into spirituality himself. And after attaining and realizing the true meaning of life, after that comes back and works with tremendous energy, because of which we are reading what we are reading today. And if you follow the lives of a lot of other saints, that is how it is. Very few of them are blessed to, like Rahul Gandhi, get the seat of, sainthood that they get. Very few of them. Most of them have worked extremely hard to get where they have got. So sannyasa is not easy path. Sannyasa is not giving up everything. Sannyasa involves extreme hard work. So Swami Chinmayananda ji tirelessly, with tremendous energy, for 4 decades after he understood, what Jivan Mukti is and attaining Jivan Mukti, he worked extremely hard for 4 decades to spread the message of Vedanta. And taught texts like Bhagavad-Gita in a language that people like us can understand. And before that, only very few people have done this. Very, very few people. Probably Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Chinmayananda, and that is why he's called the second Swami Vivekananda. He's sometimes referred to as that. And the sprawling Chinmaya mission organization, it carries forward the torch that was lit by Swami Chinmayananda. So this is what seekers like us should aspire to. How do I live this life in a more fulfilled manner? And attain, and at least aspire to attain that Jivan Mukti. So what are the qualities that are required to walk towards that goal? Whether it is Videha Mukti or Jivan Mukti, whatever it may be, having surrendered to Bhagavan. Right? That surrender part is extremely, extremely important. Because without that surrender, it is difficult to even take the first step. These are internal qualities. So which means that anybody and everybody can attain these qualities. Anyone can attain. The goals of the world, the samsaric pursuits, the Purusharthas, they are external. They have a lot of external dependencies. I may try, but because of something else or somebody else, I could not attain it. Here, there is none. Absolutely no dependencies. There are none. Everything is up to us only. Anyone can aspire, anyone can work towards it, and anyone can reach. Not just the Jivan Mukti, but also the abode of Brahman. But these are a must to start walking towards the goal. That we will see in the next verse.
Nirmana mohajita sanga doshaha.
Nirmana mohajita sanga doshaha.
Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha.
Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha.
Dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanjnehi.
Dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanjnehi.
Gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat.
Gacchanta mudha padamam vyayam tat.
Nirmana mohajita sanga doshaha. Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha. Dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanjnehi. Gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat.
So these are qualities that are required to walk towards that goal, that supreme goal. Nirmana moha. Nir means free from. Mana, pride. Moha, delusion. Jita sanga dosha. Jita, victorious. Dosha, from the defect of sanga, attachment. Adhyatma nitya. Adhyatma, dwelling in the self. Nitya, always. Vinivritta kama. Vinivritta, turning away from. Kama, desires. Vimukta, freed. Dvandaihi, from the extremes. Sanyai, that lead to. Sukha dukkha, joys and sorrows. Amudhaha, the undeluded, those free from delusion, those with pure minds. Gachanti, reach. Tat, that. Avyayam, eternal. Padam, goal. Free from pride and delusion, victorious over the defect of attachment, always dwelling in the self, turned away from desires, freed from extremes that lead to joys and sorrows, the undeluded reach the eternal goal. So let's see what each of these are. Nirmana moha, free from pride and delusion. Pride is an exaggerated estimate of oneself. When I think I'm more than what I actually am. And to maintain this false estimate of what I am not, but I think I am, is time consuming in itself. And that leads to not making progress. Like imagine hitting a 6 or thinking that you have hit a 6 only to get caught in the boundary. So people in sports, oftentimes you'll find them celebrating too soon. They celebrate too soon because they have this pride of assuming something which is not truly real. Whereas the guy who caught that marvelous, unbelievable catch was not in pride at all. That person was into the effort of making that catch. So nirmana. And in this spiritual pursuit, imagine, thinking that, you have already surrendered, you've already done this surrender aspect to Bhagavan, when actually that surrender has not even happened. That could be the biggest block in making progress. Assuming that you have reached the goal, thinking that you have finished the marathon when you have another 2 kilometers to go. That is the biggest obstacle in achieving that goal. And moha, delusion. The delusion, mana is self-pride. Delusion is with respect to the environment. Assuming things in the world outside the way you want to believe, whether they are true or not. That is moha. It makes us live in our own false world of imagination. It's our own imagined reality. Like this guy, what's his name? Yuval Noah Harari. You must read. He talks beautifully about imagined reality. So that's our own imagination. Sometimes I feel all these guys, people who make these Jurassic Park movies and not Jurassic, Avatar kind of movies, this book, what's this book called? Harari's book. A lot of them they've also read our text, that's how they've come to these kind of process of thinking. Or maybe they are saints. It came directly, like it came directly to our rishis. Anyway, it's time is going by.
Harari has read the Gita.
Yeah, Harari, she says, and he's also a very big follower of Vipassana. So when you have mana and moha, even the first step towards the goal becomes just impossible. Jita sanga dosha, with the defect of attachment having been conquered. When we see people who are completely immersed deep into attachment, in satiating their sense organs or mind and intellect or organs of action, whatever they may be. For example, take some place like Las Vegas or New York City, where I am now, the Wall Street. See, you will find, and mind you, I'm not talking about people who are working hard in these fields. I'm using these as examples because these are extreme examples to talk about people who are deep into what they are attached to. Deep, very deep. People who are immersed in, submerged in. So in Vegas, people are completely foolishly pursuing that thing of winning jackpot, right? Winning the jackpot, completely submerged and greedily getting into it. Or in the Wall Street, greedily working towards creating stock market value. When you are absolutely greedy in your pursuit, though it's a foolish pursuit, it's pretty obvious when you look at them that it is so foolish. It is so ephemeral. One of the most ephemeral things are these kind of deep pursuits. Again, not working honestly in that arena, but having that deep kind of submerged pursuit, right? So what was I going to say? But having healthy pursuits is perfectly fine in this samsara, right? This Vegas and Wall Street, in that submerged aspect, they are this completely man-made false minarets of pleasure and success. Those kind of false minarets of pleasure and success that draw irresistibly, that like a magnet pull you into a roller coaster and then bind you, shackle you and your discriminative capability of the human being. When we pursue to that extent, these kind of defects must be conquered. Jita Sangha Dosha for a spiritual aspirant. It is extremely, extremely critical. When you are attaining or working towards that goal of Jivan Mukti. Otherwise, we are not saying that you have to conquer. You need, at the end, you need mumukshutva also, the attachment to the Supreme, right? So in a way, attachment or in a way, desire is good to attain, to make progress. But when the desire becomes an extreme, Jita Sangha Dosha, Adhyatma Nitya, and when you become a higher level of spiritual aspirant, then Bhagavan is not giving you any excuse, chance or whatever. Huh? He is clearly saying Jita Sangha Dosha. Having attained victory over the defect of attachment. Adhyatma Nitya, ever dwelling in the self. So detachment from the lower happens through attachment through the higher. Right? Seeking the higher, desiring for the higher. One lets go of sense hankerings, sensual pleasures, to get attached to or to pursue activities that satisfy the intellect and the mind. And once lets go of activities that satisfy the intellect and the mind and get attached to the self, adhyatma, to pursue higher level spiritual activity. So you let go of the sensual aspects, organs of sense organs and organs of action, get attached to mind and intellect. Let go of mind and intellect, get attached to the spiritual aspect. And that is adhyatma. And adhyatma nitya is constantly dwelling in the self. Always. Ever. Vinivritta kama. Turned away from desires. With time, we know that desires either get fulfilled or they are outgrown. They get fulfilled and outgrown, or you outgrow without even fulfillment. And then they are replaced with other desires. The human mind and intellect can exist only when there is positive contemplation of some object or the other. Some desire or the positive contemplation is desire. Something or the other is a must. Without that, it is impossible for the human mind and intellect to even exist. That is why one has to turn away. Turn away from the lower, turn towards the higher. Vinivritta means turn away from desires. Disciplining the mind and intellect to not desire the finite joys. See, it's like a soldier posted on duty in the border. In some places, the border are very close, right? In Amritsar, for example, the border is very close to Amritsar. Hardly a few kilometers. Not even, 10 kilometers maybe in some spots. And then there'll be this beautiful cinema hall, a new movie has released. Can a soldier sitting out there in the trenches desire to go see the movie? Whatever, Shah Rukh Khan or whoever it may be, beating the Pakistanis left, right and center in the movie, right? He cannot desire. If he desires, one of the two will happen. Either he'll abandon his post and go see the movie, and abandoning the post is dereliction of duty, or he will sit in the post and, get dejected, thinking, oh my God, that movie is there. So the soldier uses discipline to turn away. Similarly, a surgeon, when you have to perform surgery in a hospital, you can't be thinking of going on a vacation. So professionals who are dedicated use discipline to turn away from desires. Similarly, a spiritual soldier has to discipline the mind and intellect and turn away from desires that are detrimental to spiritual progress. And just like it takes time to train a soldier, it takes time to train oneself in spirituality also. Dvandvair vimukta, freed from the pairs of opposites, the dualities, the extremes. When the above qualities are there, above meaning the earlier qualities that we just saw, Jita Nirmana Moha, Jita Sanga Dosha, Adhyatma Nitya, Vinivritta Kamaha. Then, one automatically gets freed from the pairs of opposites, the extremes, whatever those extremes may be. Also, these extremes are a part and parcel of life. Suddenly you feel cold, suddenly you feel warm. Actually, in places like this, it's crazy. One day is like really warm and hot. The other day is suddenly cold. It's weird. So heat and cold, victory and defeat, honor, dishonor, profit, loss, they're all part of life. One can't do away with it. Sukha dukkha sanyayi. That's where this comes in. It is empowering those extremes that leads to joys and sorrows. And one who does not empower the extremities is freed from the experience of joys and sorrows. And Bhagavan says such people, being undeluded, the amudaha, being free from ignorance, having a pure mind, gachanti, they reach, tat, that, padam avyayam, eternal goal, the supreme eternal goal, avyayam, eternal, padam, goal. So Bhagavan says, tat padam avyayam, that eternal goal. What is that? That he will describe we will see in our next satsang. Thank you, Hari Om.
We'll repeat today's verses. Chapter 15, verse 1 to 5. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Panchadashodhyayaha. Purushottama Yogaha. Sri Bhagavanuvacha. Urdhva Moolam Adashakam. Ashwattham Prahuravyayam. Chandamsi Yasya Karnani. Yastam Veda Savedavit. Adashodvam Prasritastasya Shakaha. Guna Pravriddha Vishaya Pravalaha. Adascha Mulanyanu Karmanubandhini Manushya Narupamasyeha Tatopalabhyade Nanto na chade na cha sampratishtha Ashwattamenam suvirudhamulam Asanga shastrena dridena chitva Tatapadam tatparimargitavyam Yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuyaha Tameva chadyam purusham prapatye Yata pravritti prasrita purani Nirmana moha jita sangha doshaha Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha Dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanjne Gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat Om asato ma sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Pratyorma amritam gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Nasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.
Hari Om. Thank you. Any thoughts, comments, questions? I had seen, one second. Kushagra, he had talked about the banyan, the big banyan, Dodda Alada Mara. That's what it's called. Huh? Yeah, I know. I've been there, and apparently the big banyan tree that spreads over 3 acres. Massive it is. Yeah. And the people
also
tree.
400 years.
Sorry, go ahead, Kushagra.
I said also 400 plus years old.
Yep, right. Yeah. And the sacred fig or Ashwatha, can you imagine, beyond 2,500, 2,400 years? Amazing. It's eternal in context.
So, this banyan tree, there is also a significance of this banyan tree in this side of the country. Like I'm in Jharkhand right now. So in Jharkhand, Bihar, there is a Vat Savitri Vrat that people do. Even in MP, it happens. So that Vata Vriksha is nothing but the banyan tree itself. And it's like a kind of a, festival wherein women fast for their husbands. So that tree, again, has a lot of significance.
Yep. Okay, cool. If there are no questions, then thank you. Hari Om. We will meet next Saturday. Continue with chapter 15.